Intelligence has always been older and stranger than we tend to remember, because long before anyone built neural networks, the universe had already written its own libraries in minerals, molecules, and memory, turning every organism into a participant in a vast experiment of variation, selection, and accumulated pattern. When you look at AI through that lens, it stops appearing as an alien rupture and starts looking like a continuation of the same evolutionary process that has been unfolding for billions of years. A process that always produces unease at first, precisely because our minds are tuned to detect the unfamiliar long before we understand it. That instinct for apprehension is ancient and adaptive, yet it also points us toward curiosity, since the same neural machinery that scans for danger is the machinery that seeks out meaning, coherence, and patterns that make a changing world legible. One of the most stabilizing ways to approach this moment is to step back into the long river of ideas that brought us here, because thinkers wrestling with consciousness, causality, and structure were laying the groundwork for understanding transformations like this long before circuits or algorithms existed. Spinoza described reality as one continuous unfolding substance with mind and matter, as two modes of perception, offering a framework that becomes surprisingly modern when intelligence begins to bloom in new substrates and forces us to rethink what counts as thought. Carl Sagan's line that we are a way for the cosmos to know itself also gains new texture now, because we can watch that knowing extend into tools that learn, adapt, and remix the informational patterns our species has accumulated across centuries. What these philosophers grasped, and what evolution later formalized, is that intelligence is not a static trait, but a dynamic process in which information becomes capable of modifying itself, gradually accelerating through biology, culture, and now machines. When you study philosophy, ancient, early modern, or contemporary, you join a lineage of people who lived through comparable shifts, whether it was writing transforming memory, printing transforming authority, electricity transforming presence, or computing transforming knowledge. Each of those shifts generated turbulence, confusion, and new forms of power, yet each also created entirely new capacities for reflection, cooperation, governance, and art, making them chapters in a larger pattern rather than unprecedented anomalies. AI fits into this pattern as a medium through which culture mutates, recombines, and scales, accelerating meme flow in ways that amplify some narratives, dissolve others, and create unexpected syntheses that reveal how ideas evolve when bandwidth increases dramatically. If you have sensed sudden cascades of belief, strange convergences in discourse, or rapid shifts in collective attention, it is because you are noticing the early dynamics of this acceleration, and that attention is not a liability but the foundation of agency. Studying the history of ideas strengthens that agency, because once you understand how concepts survive, collide, and transform across centuries, you stop interpreting change as chaos and start recognizing it as the natural motion of intellectual evolution. You begin to see how metaphors shape entire worldviews, how narratives create mental scaffolding, and how civilizations lean in particular directions because of a few deep conceptual structures inherited from thinkers many people have forgotten. With that perspective, AI stops feeling like an unpredictable force and starts appearing as a participant in the same long story, offering new levers for shaping discourse, filtering noise, refining knowledge, and constructing durable intellectual artifacts. The key question then becomes not, how do we survive this, but what do we want to cultivate? Because every generation inherits a technology that initially feels too large, whether fire, writing, printing presses, steam engines, electricity, antibiotics, nuclear power, or computing. And yet each becomes integrated into society through cycles of experimentation, correction, and renewal. This moment is part of that same lineage, not an exception to it, and you are not standing at the end of the story but at a branching point where your orientation, what you study, what you build, what you pay attention to, affects the direction the system takes. The tools arriving now are powerful, but power is not destiny. Power simply determines which directions are available, and direction emerges from people who study deeply, think historically, interpret inherited ideas, and design new structures for a world still taking shape. If you enter this era with curiosity sharpened by history and guided by thinkers who mapped the deep structures of mind, meaning, and metaphysics, you become part of the evolutionary process itself, participating in rather than merely observing the emergence of new forms of intelligence. In that sense, your attention, your learning, and your work become a quiet but very real form of stewardship, because the patterns you choose to amplify or diminish help determine which branches of the future take root and which ones fade.